Let's get to it, though. We're doing a little short series here because this is what we did with the kids at camp. We looked at what would Jesus do, trying to be very practical about our life. In each situation, asking ourselves, what would Jesus do? And, of course, this was first brought up in this book by Charles Sheldon in the late 1800s. He was a pastor who decided, you know what, don't know what to do Sunday nights. I got to get people in, so I'm going to write a book. And each week I'm going to read a chapter. But he came with this idea of a pastor in the book who's struggling, and a guy shows up and asks him that very question. What would Jesus do? And he challenges his congregation to ask that question, what would Jesus do? I encourage everybody to read the book, by the way. And there's copies out there. Take them, read them, hand them, give them to somebody else, bring them back. I don't care. So we got a good deal on them, too. Man, I was on Christian Book, and at $35, you got free shipping. And I bought 10 of them and a couple other things, and they kept telling me, you don't have enough money. You don't have enough. You don't have enough. Because these were on sale for $1.50 each. So it's like, oh, I had to buy some more stuff. So I got some more tracts. You always need more tracts. But so what would Jesus do? A very simple question, isn't it? But very difficult to answer sometimes. And we saw last week, basically, what would Jesus do? We give an introduction that this is something we should ask ourselves constantly. What would we do in various situations? And today, the situation we're going to look at is when we see the needy, when we interact with people in need. Now, I've used these pictures before, but I do want your reaction again. Do you see somebody who's been in jail? What's your first thought? You see somebody who's a drug addict. What's your first thought? How about these people? The homeless, the needy, the poor. What's your first thought? The oppressed? People of different religions? What is your first thought? What goes through your mind first when you see people like this, especially if that person then comes to you and you find out they have a need? First of all, do you see them at all? Do you notice them at all? Do you look at them at all? Do you interact with them at all? Or is it like, no, no, no? Don't want anything to do with those. Is that what Jesus would do? You have to remember, Jesus grew up and he lived during a time when the attitude of the Jews toward these people like these, were what? Don't talk to them. Don't look at them. Don't interact with them. They all just deserve whatever they got. They all are worthless. They all should be, we don't want anything to do with them. Fortunately, we don't live, hopefully, like that. Because when Jesus would interact with these people, what would the religious leaders say? What would society say? They say, how horrible. Why would he do that? Why would he interact with them? Why would he talk to that person? Why would he help that person? And that's what we're going to look at today. What did Jesus see? What did Jesus do in various situations? These are all going to be taken from the book of John, so it's going to be very easy to kind of walk through them. We're going to see how did Jesus react when somebody, he either saw them or somebody came to him who had a need. Now, next week we'll look at sinners. Okay, we'll go deeper. How did he interact with sinners? People who clearly were doing wrong. How should we interact? And how should we interact with people in need? So let's all grab our Bibles and let's go to John. And the first person we're going to look at, and this is, according to the book of John, the very first miracle that Jesus publicly did. And it was at a wedding. Kind of appropriate. And the father of the bride, not the father of the groom, the father of the bride was a fool. Because you have to remember, back then, it took people a while to travel. So for this person coming to the wedding on Saturday, it'd probably take them 3 or 4 hours to get there, It took them days. And so when you got to the wedding, you weren't going, sitting down, having a little dinner, a little nosh, and then kind of the next morning heading out. You're staying for how long? days. In fact, weddings tended to go for 4 or 5 or 6. I'm getting a lot of nodding up and down from the people from India in the back. It's like, yeah, it still goes that way. Still, some cultures are still that way. And it is the job of the father of the bride to provide what? Enough food and drink to last all the guests for as long as they stay. And Jesus goes to this wedding, and look what happens. In John chapter 2, starting in verse 1. And the third day there was a marriage in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there, and both Jesus was called and his disciples to the marriage. And let's face it, back then it wasn't a limited list. If you were one of those who said, only 50 people can show up, or only 75, forget it. It was like you come and you bring everybody. You had no idea who was coming. Not like they could call, RSVP, send a little internet note, right? You have no idea who's coming. And everybody just shows up, and you're expected to have enough, right? Verse 3, and when they wanted wine, the mother of Jesus said unto him, they have no wine. And this is a cultural, societal disaster. To run out of wine. He will be seen as cheap, foolish, a terrible host. He'll be laughed at and mocked in his society for this happening. But whose fault is it? His fault, right? He was foolish. He didn't prepare. He didn't make enough, didn't have enough. It's his fault, right? So here's what happens. And when they wanted wine, verse 3, the mother of Jesus said unto him, they have no wine. Jesus said to her, woman, what have I to do with thee? Mine hour is not yet come. So basically he asked the basic question of, why is this my problem, right? And can we take that attitude sometimes? That you see a need, and your first response is what? What has this got to do with me? Jesus rightfully says, I have work to do. What kind of work does Jesus have to do? Saving the world from their sins. Is that a big deal? Is that a big job? Can anybody else do that job? He has a job. His ministry has not quite started yet. He hasn't gone through everything he's supposed to go through in order to start that ministry. He's not supposed to be doing miracles yet. This isn't my job. This isn't my problem. He's the one that didn't have wine. He's got to figure it out. He's got to go figure out how to get some more. That's his problem. How easy is it to make that an excuse why not to help? It's not my problem. It's not my fault. What do you want me to do about it? That's his initial response, but what did he do? What would Jesus do? This man needs help. And who asked him? His mom. Come on. Your mom is asking to help. So, do all those excuses matter? Do all those reasons matter? No. In fact, verse 5, his mother said unto the servants, whatsoever he says unto you, do it. She knew he was going to do it, right? And what did he do? Verse 6, and there were 6 water pots of stone, after the manner of purifying the Jews, containing 2 or 3 firkins. Everybody know your firkins? Each firkin's about 9 gallons. So how much are we talking about? 18 to 27 gallons of water. Is that a lot? This isn't a little pot, is it? They're big pots for purifying. And he saw them sitting there, 6 of them, and Jesus said to them, fill the water pots with water, and they filled them up to the brim. These guys are smart, right? They didn't just fill them halfway. They didn't fill them a third. They didn't fill them just to where they filled. They filled them all the way up to the tip top. And he said to them, draw out now and bear unto the governor, the man of the house, of the feast. And they bare it. When the ruler of the feast had tasted the water that was made wine, and knew not whence it was, but the servants which drew the water knew, the governor of the feast called the bridegroom, and said unto him, every man at the beginning doth set forth good wine, and when men have well drunk, then that which is worse. But you have kept the good wine until now. So not only did he turn water to wine, but he turned water into what? Good wine. But that's not the point. The point is, he could have made the excuse, it isn't my problem. It's not my job. That's not what I'm supposed to be doing. Instead, he said what? There is a problem, therefore I will what? His fault. So, does he need help? Does Jesus have the means to help? Therefore, he helped. What about us? If we have the ability to help, should we help? Yeah. Does it matter if it's our job? Does it matter if it's their fault? No, it doesn't matter. Even if they're foolish, even if it's their mistake, if we have the means, we should what? Help. Let's go to the next one. John chapter 4. Verse 46. Guess where he is again? Cana. He comes back to Cana. What did he do in between? Oh, nothing except the sea. Baptized by John the Baptist, 40 days in the wilderness, tempted by Satan 3 times. That's all. That's all he's been doing, right? And we saw last week how he dealt with temptation and being tried and being tested, right? He got through with flying colors. But now he's back in Cana, verse 46. So Jesus came again unto Cana of Galilee, where he had made the water wine. And there was a certain nobleman whose son was sick at Capernaum. And when he heard that Jesus was come out of Judea into Galilee, he went unto him and besought him that he would come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. Then Jesus said unto him, except you see the signs and wonders, you will not believe. What's Jesus' first reaction again? And I think always a question in my mind. You ever question in your mind, why does Jesus say these things? Looking at these from this perspective, I think he says these things because this is what we say. Basically, the bottom line is, why should I? Who is this guy asking? A nobleman. What does he got? He's got money. He's got influence. He's got power. Why is he coming to Jesus? Is he just looking for a sign? Just trying to get him to just kind of do something special for him? Is he doing that kind of thing? And that's the way we sometimes react. Hey, why should I help you? Would you ever help me, nobleman? Would you ever back me up? Would you ever help me if I was in need? Do you help the poor? Do you help people in need? Why should I help you? You have power, you have influence, take care of it yourself. Why should I help? You only want it so you can pad your ideas and support your philosophies and things like that. Why should I help you? That thought ever come across your mind? Somebody in need, why should I help you? What have you ever done for me? What would you ever do for me? What do you do for other people? You don't deserve it. And he says that. But what does the man say? Let's keep going. Verse 49. The nobleman said unto him, Sir, come down, ere my child die. In other words, no, I'm here because I'm desperate. I have no other options. If you don't come, if you don't help me, my child will die. And all my money and all my power and all my influence and all those, none of that's going to help me. I need you. And what did Jesus say to that? Well, if you need me. Jesus said to him, Go thy way, thy son lives. In fact, the man did. He left, started heading back to Capernaum, and his servants met him along the way. And guess who was fine? His son was fine. In fact, they worked it out so as soon as Jesus said, Your son lives, that was the exact hour that the child got better. So is God able? Did he have the means? Was he going to allow his own ideas about the person, his own ideas about what that person would do or not do, or any of those kinds of things stop him from helping him? No. He needed him. So the pleading man, he helped, right? Should we help people? What if they should just help themselves? What if they'd never helped us? What if they wouldn't help us? Remember the Good Samaritan? Remember that story? Who should we help? If we have the ability, what would Jesus do? Help. Let's go to another interesting one. Let's go to John chapter 5. John chapter 5, verse 1. And this time Jesus is going to Jerusalem, and he's going for a feast. Basically, Jesus went to the feasts. We studied that recently. That was kind of fun, going through all the feasts that Jesus went to. And he's going to the feast, and it says here in chapter 5, verse 1, after this there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is at Jerusalem by the sheep market a pool, which is called in Hebrew tongue Bethesda. Anybody ever heard of that before? We're up in Maryland, right up here. Yeah, that's named after that. Having 5 porches, so these 5 kind of step downs into this pool. In these porches, these large porches, lay a great multitude of impotent folk, people who could not walk, could not move, sick, ill, all kinds of infirmities of all different kinds. All these people, impotent folk, of blind, halt, withered, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel went down at a certain season into the pool and troubled the water. Whosoever then first after troubling of the water stepped in was made whole of whatsoever disease he had. Now we can have a whole lesson on whether that's true or not. And you know the answer? No idea. That's what everybody believed, though. That's the important part. They were all there because they believed that if they sat there long enough, an angel would come down and stir the water, and the first one in got healed. Which in my mind is always like, well, first one in was probably not that bad off to begin with. But I don't know. I don't know. Well, God can do whatever he wants to do. If he wants to send angels to pools, I'm fine with that too. But that's what it is. So, and out of all that, I want you to kind of close your eyes a little bit, and I want you to picture that. You're coming into Jerusalem, and you see this pool, and you just see a multitude. 100? 200? 250 people? Laying on mats, people who are blind, people who can't walk, people that are shriveled up in their arms and have diseases of all different kinds, just spread out across these 5 porches. People who would help them, people aiding them, some that would kind of, when they saw that, would throw them into the pool. There was that going on. I want you to get that picture in your head. And I want you to notice something. What does the next say? Verse 5. And a certain man was there which had an infirmity 38 years. 38 years he could not walk. By the way, is that a long time? Yeah. When Jesus saw him lie and knew that he had now a long time in that case, he said unto him, Wilt thou be made whole? Did the man come to him? Out of the 100, 200, 250 people there, how many did Jesus help that day? 1. See, this is another excuse we can sometimes use, is why that one? I mean, all those people, now, frankly, how many of those could have Jesus healed? All of them. But sometimes we go into situations, you see a homeless encampment, right? You see a bunch of poor people. You see the oppression. You see a problem. You see war. You see refugees. You see all that, and you say, what? I can't help them all. I can't solve this problem. So what do? I'd rather not see it at all. But what if God does put one child, one mother, one impotent man? What if he puts one on your heart and says, go talk to him? Will we? Or is it easier to say, well, yeah, but if I try to help him, then I'll have to help everybody, and it's just too much. I can't solve this problem. You know what God's asking you to do is solve how many? 1. And that's the lesson here for me. Out of all those people, he helped 1. Is God okay with that? Yeah, that's what God called him to. God did not call him to heal everybody that day. He called him to help 1. And he went to that one and says, do you want to be healed? And of course the man said, yeah, I'd love to be, but there's nobody to help me into the water. And when it stirs, somebody always gets there first. I've been doing this for 38 years. And I can't get in. What does Jesus say? Pick up your pad and what? Walk. Did he? Yeah, and then he got in trouble for carrying his mat on a Sabbath day, but that's beside the point. Don't let religion get in the way either, okay? Please. But we need to remember this. Yes, you're not going to go down to D.C. and fix all of the homeless problem. You're not going to fix all the poverty problem. You're not going to fix every broken home. You're not going to fix every issue of every single person in Fairfax County. You're not going to do it, more or less, Annandale or the whole country or the whole world. You're not going to. But if God puts it on your heart, then what should you do? Do it. We actually had this conversation with the kids. I don't know how many of you drive through Annandale, but this intersection down here, there's always homeless people walking up and down with their signs. You know, I'm driving in the church van. Oh, yeah. And the kids asked, should we give them money? I said, generally speaking, no. No, that's not. I don't just give, but there are times when I just feel that inkling. Sometimes coming out of Safeway, I remember a kid there. He was like 19 years old. Having a rough day. And I don't know. The Lord said, why don't you help him out a little bit? There's a guy by IHOP. Got an extra cup of coffee and a little something to eat. And I just felt, every time? No. Everyone? No. But should we be open to helping those that God calls? Because we don't know what God's doing in that life. We don't know what's happening in that time. And just a little bit, but God knows, right? Why this one? Why this one guy? Why not the others? Well, because God had a plan in all, right? Should we be open to that? Pray about that. Listen for that. Look at them is a good start, right? Look at them and say, does God want me to? Sometimes no. A few times, what? Maybe yes. So be that. That's what Jesus did. He helped one that day, right? Do that. How about the blind man? Let's go to John chapter 9. John chapter 9, verse 1. His disciples are going to get into the act here. In John chapter 9, verse 1, and Jesus passed by, he saw a man which was blind from his birth. He was born without the eyeballs, the connections, whatever. He'd never been able to see his entire life. Therefore, he's been poor his entire life. Therefore, he's been a beggar his entire adult life. That's what he does. Now, look at the reaction of the people. What does disciples say? Verse 2. And his disciples asked him, saying, Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Oh, that's an easy excuse, isn't it? Why shouldn't I help this person? Because it's their fault. Yeah, right? They made their bed. They need to what? Lie in it. Right? Yeah, it's their fault they're a drug addict. This is their fault they did this. Or it's that fault they did that. It's all their fault. Why should I help them? That was their response. In fact, that was a response to everybody. Anybody who was halt, anybody who was blind, anybody who had leprosy, anybody who had any kind of problem, it was always what? That was their fault. They deserved it. That's not a lot of help there, is it? In fact, when Jesus would cast out a demon or help them, everybody would be like, oh, how dare you? These terrible sinners. What does Jesus say, as a matter of fact? Verse 3. Jesus answered, neither has this man sinned nor his parents. No, not their fault. Why do bad things happen sometimes? Because we live in a terrible, fallen world. That's right? There's sin out there. Bad things happen. There's disease. Does everybody who's got a disease deserve it? Everybody destroyed by a climate problem and deserve it? No. It's not why. This is a bad world. It's a cursed world. Plus, sometimes it's God doing something amazing, but that the works of God should be made manifest in him. I must work the works of him that sent me. While it is day, the night cometh when no man can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. And you know how the story goes from there. He takes some clay, puts some little spit in it, throws it on his eyes and said, go wash it off. And when he washed it off, what could he see? Everything. Miracle. And the people at the time said what? How dare you? How dare you say this man healed you? Nobody can heal. Only God can heal. Blah, blah, blah. And I love his response to the people in charge. This is an amazing thing. This is, I know. Nobody's ever been healed, being born blind. Only God can heal. This guy healed me, therefore, he's God. I mean, right? So they threw him out of the synagogue. You're not welcome here anymore. You can't be here anymore. You're a liar. And it's like, yeah. Sometimes we can look at people and just say, well, it's their own fault, so why would I help them? If I helped them, they just go back and do some more of that, and they're just going to do some more things, and they're going to do this, that, and the other thing. I'm not going to help them. If the Lord is putting it on your heart to help them, what should you do? Help them. Encourage them. In fact, I want you to keep going, verse 35. I love what Jesus did. Again, this man was thrown out of the synagogue for being healed and claiming that Jesus healed him, for talking back to them. And then there's verse 35. Jesus heard that they had cast this man out, and when he had found him, he said unto him, do you believe on the Son of God? And he answered, who is he, Lord, that I might believe on him? Again, remember, he's never seen Jesus. Why? Because he was blind last time they met, right? He has no idea what he's talking about here. And Jesus said unto him, you have both seen him, and it is he that talketh with you. And he said, Lord, I believe. And he worshipped him. And I want you to also notice this. Is it enough just to meet people's physical needs? You know, when we see this with Jesus over and over again. Yes, he would take care of their physical. He may heal them. But even after that, and we'll see this again with sinners next week, even after he healed them, after he helped them, he always comes back and says what? Remember, though, that I am who? I am God. You must worship me. You must be saved by me. You must take care of that spiritual problem. We need to remember that too, don't we? Because what if we do? What if we do clothe the world, feed the world, cause all diseases go away, help everybody, yet never tell them about salvation through Jesus Christ? What have we done? Giving people a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful path to hell. Does that do anybody any good? No. So what do we learn from this? Is it a good excuse to say, it's their fault? No. But remember what they need. What do they really need? They need salvation. And that man was saved. Right? Finally, let's go to the dead man. Dead man? What can you do for a dead man? It's amazing what God can do for a dead man. John chapter 11. You know who I'm talking about. Lazarus. And this is also a good excuse why not to help people. There's no hope. Right? I can't fix this problem. I can't help it. I can't help. With God, what can you do? See, that's the problem here. John chapter 11. Now a certain man was sick named Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. It was Mary which anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. So does he know them? Yes. Does he love them? Yes. Has he been to their house many times? Yes. Therefore his sisters sent unto him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom thou lovest is sick. When Jesus heard that, he said, this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God might be glorified thereby. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. When he had heard, therefore, that he was sick, he abode 2 days still in the same place where he was. Does that sound like love to you? Oh, he's sick unto death. I guess I'll stay here a couple of days. What was he waiting for? Lazarus to die? Because he wanted people to really know who he was. He wanted people to really know what God can do, right? And sometimes people are put in some very difficult situations. It seems impossible. But if God, again, puts it on your heart to help, you may sit there and say, there's nothing I can do, there's nothing I can do. With God, what is possible? Anything's possible. Just be willing to go and say, hey, I'm here. What do you want me to do? How do you want me to help? You want me just to pray? You want me just to be there? You want me to talk to them? You want me to help them? You want me to give them $10? What do you want me to do? It seems hopeless, but is there always hope with God? And was there hope in this situation? Oh, Martha got mad at him. Mary got mad at him. People were crying all over the place. He'd been dead for 4 days by the time Jesus got there. Did that stop Jesus? No. In fact, what does he pray? Lord, so that they may know. Lazarus, come forth. See, that's the one thing I realized this week. Was he there to help Lazarus? Not really. How many would agree Lazarus was fine? Where was Lazarus? His soul was in heaven. Lazarus was fine. Who was he really helping? Mary? Martha? All those mourners, all those weepers, so that they may, and what does it say at the end? Most of them believed. Now, some didn't. What are you going to do? It helps us too, doesn't it? He was there. He did that to help us. And he may, and even in some situations, he may use you, and the situation you're going into doesn't solve the problem. But it may solve another problem. It may help somebody else. It may give somebody else hope for another situation you don't know. So you've got to be what? Available. You got to go and be, if Lord puts it on your heart, go. Because in each situation, even when they've made a mistake, that's why they're in that situation, should you still help? Even though it seems like the person could help themselves, don't really need you, should you still help? Even though the person, there's so many, just one, help. Even if, blind man, what can I do? It's his fault, right? He's in the situation. No. Dead, there is no hope. Because that brings me to the question. What did Jesus do for you? How many of us were foolish? How many of us had no other way? No place else to go? Tried many different ways, worked many different ways, self-righteous, but we realized we had no place else to go. We needed Jesus. Did he help us? How many of us were completely without strength? No way to save ourselves. Did he help us? How many of us were blind because of our sin? Living in darkness because it was our fault. Did he still help us? How many of us were dead in our trespasses and sin? And did Jesus come and help us? What did Jesus do to help us? Went to the cross. Went all the way for us so that we can be saved. And if Jesus did that, can we take a little bit of our time? Can we take a little bit of our resources? Can we take a little bit of even sometimes our pride? If the Lord says, help them, get rid of all the excuses and say, no, if God wants me to help them, I will help them. Give them a meal, give them some help, talk to them, pray for them, whatever, reach out to them, whatever it is. See them and help them. Can it get frustrating? Can it get tiresome? Can it get annoying? We're going to see how Jesus handles that too. Because that's a fact. Sometimes doing this can really wear on you, but we're going to see what Jesus did then too, okay? But it starts here, seeing them, opening our eyes, and letting the Holy Spirit, letting God say, hey, help that person. Sometimes they'll come to us. Sometimes we'll have to go to them. It doesn't matter. If you feel like God's moving you to do it, what? Do it. Let's pray. Heavenly Father,